Thanksgiving dinner at my childhood home in suburban Columbus, Ohio. 12 family members crowded around the dining room table my mother had decorated with autumn leaves and orange candles. I was explaining to my cousin Jake why I might need to step away early to handle a client emergency when my father, Gerald, suddenly stood up. His wine glass caught the chandelier light as he raised it high above his head. "Everyone, listen up," he announced with that booming voice that always demanded attention. "My son Sean here thinks his little computer job where he works in pajamas is a real career." The entire table erupted in laughter. My mother Patricia giggled behind her napkin. Uncle Rick slapped the table and shouted about real men having real jobs. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks as every pair of eyes stared at me with amusement. I grabbed my leather jacket from the coat closet and walked straight out the front door without saying goodbye. The November air bit through my sweater as I sat in my Honda Accord, hands trembling on the steering wheel. The humiliation burned deeper than the cold wind cutting through the neighborhood. During the 40-minute drive back to my apartment in the short North District, memories flooded back like a broken dam. When I graduated summa cum laude with my computer science degree from Ohio State, Gerald refused to attend the ceremony. He called it 4 years of playing with toys instead of learning a real trade. While my classmates' families celebrated at restaurants afterward, I ate alone at a diner, staring at my diploma. Now, at 28, I worked as a senior back-end developer for a fintech startup called Velocity Pay. I grabbed my leather jacket from the coat closet and walked straight out the front door without saying goodbye. The November air bit through my sweater as I sat in my Honda Accord, hands trembling on the steering wheel. The humiliation burned deeper than the cold wind cutting through the neighborhood. During the 40-minute drive back to my apartment in the short North District, memories flooded back like a broken dam. When I graduated summa cum laude with my computer science degree from Ohio State, Gerald refused to attend the ceremony. He called it 4 years of playing with toys instead of learning a real trade. While my classmates' families celebrated at restaurants afterward, I ate alone at a diner, staring at my diploma. Now, at 28, I worked as a senior back-end developer for a fintech startup called Velocity Pay. My cousin Sarah sent, "You know how Uncle Gerald gets after a few glasses of wine. He doesn't mean anything by it." Even my Aunt Linda chimed in with, "Your father works hard to provide. You should respect his traditional values." Not one person defended me. Not one family member questioned whether publicly humiliating someone at a holiday gathering might be inappropriate. They all expected me to absorb the disrespect and smile for the sake of family harmony. Back in my apartment, I poured myself a bourbon and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. The financial district stretched below me, buildings filled with the kind of professionals who understood the value of technology and innovation. These were my peers, not the people who still believed real work required calloused hands and a factory whistle. My laptop chimed with an urgent email notification. The sender was Jonathan Hayes, Chief Executive Officer of Velocity Pay. The subject line read, "Critical Client Presentation, Monday Required." My pulse quickened as I opened the message. "Sean, I need you to lead the technical presentation for the Henderson Manufacturing acquisition on Monday morning. This is a $50 million deal that hinges entirely on demonstrating your proprietary transaction processing algorithm. The board of directors specifically requested to meet the architect behind our revolutionary system. This presentation could define the next 5 years of our company's growth. I'm counting on you to showcase why your innovation will transform their entire operation." Meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. at their corporate headquarters in Westerville. I stared at the email, processing the magnitude of what Jonathan was asking. Henderson Manufacturing wanted to implement my financial software across their entire supply chain network. The algorithm I had developed could reduce their processing time from weeks to minutes, saving millions in operational costs. The bitter irony hit me like a physical blow. while my father had just finished mocking my career in front of our entire extended family. I held the technical expertise that could close one of the largest deals in our company's history. The presentation would determine whether dozens of my colleagues kept their jobs and whether Velocity Pay secured its position as an industry leader. I walked to my home office and pulled up the Henderson manufacturing file. As I began reviewing the technical specifications and preparing my presentation materials, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. Tomorrow I would prove my worth to people who mattered in my professional world, but the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had chosen to laugh at my accomplishments instead of celebrating them. The next 4 days blurred together in a haze of preparation and family drama. I worked 18-hour shifts, fine-tuning my presentation slides and stress-testing every component of my algorithm. The Henderson deal represented more than money. It validated everything I had built over the past 3 years. Emma called Tuesday evening, her voice strained with worry. "Sean, Mom keeps asking when you're coming back over. She made your favorite pecan pie and wants to apologize for laughing at dinner. She wants to apologize for laughing," I repeated slowly. "What about Dad apologizing for humiliating me? You know how he is." Emma sighed. "He thinks you're being too sensitive. He says men in our family don't hold grudges over harmless jokes." Harmless jokes. I closed my eyes and rubbed my temples. Emma, would it be a harmless joke if I stood up at his workplace and announced to all his co-workers that his factory job was meaningless, busy work for people too stupid to learn real skills? The silence stretched between us. Finally, she whispered, "That would be cruel." Exactly. My girlfriend Jessica arrived Wednesday night with Thai takeout and a bottle of wine. She worked as a marketing director for a tech company downtown and understood the pressure I was under. Unlike my family, she respected my career and celebrated my successes. "Your father is an insecure dinosaur," she said, unpacking containers of pad thai and green curry. "As threatened by your success because it highlights his own limitations." "Maybe I should just let it go," I muttered, stabbing at my noodles. "Keep the peace for Mom's sake." Jessica set down her fork and looked at me seriously. "Sean, you've spent your entire adult life trying to earn his approval. When has he ever acknowledged your achievements? Your promotion last year, buying this apartment, the patent application for your algorithm. Has he congratulated you even once?" She was right. Every milestone in my career had been met with silence or subtle criticism from Gerald. When I bought my first new car, he commented that real men work on their own vehicles instead of paying mechanics. When I got my promotion to senior developer, he asked if I was done playing computer games for a living yet. Thursday morning brought another emotional phone call, this time from my mother, Patricia. "Sean, honey, your father didn't mean to hurt your feelings. He just doesn't understand your generation's work. Can't you come home and talk this through like adults?" "Mom." He stood up in front of 12 people and announced that my career was fake. Then everyone laughed at me, including you. "How is that not intentionally hurtful?" "I wasn't laughing at you, sweetheart. I was laughing at his silly joke. The joke was that my life's work is meaningless." Her silence told me everything. She still didn't understand why I was upset. Friday evening, I received the final technical specifications from Henderson Manufacturing. As I reviewed their corporate structure and operational challenges, something caught my attention. The document listed their main production facility address, Westerville, Ohio. Their primary manufacturing plant employed 600 people and had operated for over 30 years. A cold realization washed over me. Westerville was where my father worked. Gerald had been a floor supervisor at a manufacturing company for 3 decades. I opened a new browser tab and searched for Henderson Manufacturing's employee directory. My heart stopped. Gerald Morrison, floor supervisor, production division, 31 years of service. The client company whose $50 million deal I was presenting on Monday was my father's employer. The algorithm I had developed, the one Gerald's colleagues would evaluate, could determine the future of his workplace. If the deal succeeded, it would modernize their operations and secure hundreds of jobs. If it failed, they would likely seek alternative solutions that might include downsizing or outsourcing. I stared at the screen, processing the cosmic irony. The son, whose career Gerald had publicly mocked on Thanksgiving, now held the technical key to his father's professional survival. Monday morning, I would walk into his building and demonstrate technology that could transform his company's efficiency and profitability. The weight of this knowledge pressed down on me like a concrete slab. I had wanted validation and respect from my father. Instead, fate had handed me something much more complicated: power over his future. While he remained completely unaware of my involvement in his company's next chapter, the weekend passed in a blur of ethical wrestling and presentation preparation. I researched Henderson Manufacturing's financial situation and discovered they were in more trouble than I had initially realized. Industry reports indicated they were struggling to compete with overseas manufacturers who offered lower prices and faster delivery times. Without significant operational improvements, they faced potential bankruptcy within the next 18 months. 3 months. That was how long Gerald's company could survive without a major efficiency overhaul. The $50 million investment from Velocity Pay represented their best hope for modernization and survival. If my presentation failed, 600 employees would likely lose their jobs by spring, including my father. I called Jessica Saturday evening, needing someone to help me process this impossible situation. "What are the odds?" she asked in amazement. "That the biggest presentation of your career would be for your dad's company?" "I keep wondering if I should tell him," I admitted, pacing my apartment. "Warn him that Monday's meeting could save his job, and give him the chance to sabotage your presentation," Jessica asked sharply. "Sean, this man has spent years undermining your confidence. What makes you think he wouldn't try to interfere if he knew you held his future in your hands?" She had a point. Gerald's pride might compel him to reject help from the son whose career he considered illegitimate. He might even view my involvement as some kind of patronizing gesture, rather than the professional achievement it represented. Sunday morning brought devastating news. Emma called in tears, barely able to speak through her sobs. "Sean, Dad had a heart attack at work yesterday. Has in the hospital." My coffee mug slipped from my hands and shattered on the kitchen floor. "What happened? Is he okay?" "He was working a double shift, stressed about rumors of layoffs at the plant. Mom found him collapsed in the garage when he got home. The doctors say it was mild, but they're keeping him for observation." The irony burned like acid in my throat. While I had been preparing to save his job, Gerald had been working himself into cardiac distress, worried about losing the very position my presentation could preserve. "Mom wants you to visit," Emma continued. "She's scared and needs the family together." "What does Dad want?" Emma's silence stretched uncomfortably long. "He told the nurse he doesn't want to see his disappointment of a son right now. He says you abandoned the family over a silly dinner joke." Disappointment of a son. The words hit harder than his public humiliation at Thanksgiving. Even from a hospital bed, Gerald couldn't acknowledge that his behavior might have been inappropriate. I spent Sunday afternoon walking through German Village, trying to clear my head before Monday's presentation. I had seen brilliant innovations fail because the presenter couldn't navigate the human elements of corporate decision-making. As I walked back to my apartment that evening, I made a decision. I would deliver the best presentation of my career, not to prove anything to my father, but because 600 families depended on Henderson Manufacturing for their livelihoods. Gerald might never acknowledge my contribution, but I could live with that knowledge. The next morning, I put on my best charcoal suit, grabbed my presentation materials, and drove toward Westerville. During the 20-minute drive, I wondered if I would see my father's car in the employee parking lot. The doctors had released him Sunday evening, and knowing Gerald's work ethic, he would probably insist on returning to his supervisor duties, despite medical advice to rest. As I pulled into Henderson Manufacturing's executive parking area, I felt the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. In 90 minutes, I would either secure my company's largest deal and save my father's job, or watch everything collapse while Gerald remained blissfully unaware of my involvement. The presentation folder felt heavy in my hands as I walked toward the corporate entrance, carrying the future of Velocity Pay and Henderson Manufacturing in my algorithm's elegant code. Henderson Manufacturing's corporate headquarters impressed me with its blend of modern technology and industrial heritage. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the production facility where my father had worked for over 3 decades. As I waited in the executive conference room, I could see employees in safety vests moving between massive machinery that stamped and formed metal components. Jonathan Hayes arrived 30 minutes early, nervous energy radiating from his usually calm demeanor. "Sean, this presentation needs to be flawless. Henderson's board is notoriously conservative about technology investments. They've been burned by promises from other software companies that failed to deliver results." "The algorithm speaks for itself," I replied, connecting my laptop to the conference room's presentation system. "The financial projections are conservative, and the implementation timeline is realistic." At exactly 9 o'clock, Henderson's executive team filed into the conference room. Chief Executive Officer Marcus Thompson led the group, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and intelligent eyes. Chief Financial Officer Diana Walsh followed, carrying a thick folder of financial analyses. Chief Operations Officer Robert Chen completed the trio, his engineering background evident in his precise questions about technical specifications. "Gentlemen," Marcus began, settling into his chair at the head of the conference table, "Velocity Pay has promised revolutionary improvements to our transaction processing systems. We're interested in solutions, not sales pitches. Show us what makes your technology different." I stood and activated my presentation. The opening slide displayed Henderson's current processing workflow, a complex maze of manual approvals, paper documentation, and system delays that created bottlenecks throughout their supply chain. "Your current transaction system processes an average of 47 purchase orders per hour," I began, highlighting the inefficiencies with laser precision. "Each order requires manual intervention at 6 separate points, creating delays that compound exponentially during peak production periods." Diana leaned forward, studying the workflow diagram. "Our analysis shows similar results. What's your proposed solution?" I clicked to the next slide, revealing my algorithm's streamlined approach. "My proprietary processing system eliminates manual bottlenecks by automating authorization protocols while maintaining strict security controls. Instead of 47 orders per hour, you'll process over 400. The room fell silent as the executives absorbed the implications. Robert scribbled calculations on his notepad, while Marcus studied the technical architecture with growing interest. "The financial impact is substantial," I continued, displaying projected cost savings. "Annual processing costs will decrease from $2.8 million to $750,000. The system pays for itself within 18 months while generating ongoing savings of over $2 million annually." For the next hour, I walked them through every component of my algorithm. I demonstrated real-time processing capabilities, explained security protocols, and answered increasingly complex technical questions. Robert challenged my scalability assumptions. Diana questioned the implementation timeline, and Marcus probed the long-term maintenance requirements. With each answer, I watched their skepticism transform into genuine excitement. These were serious business leaders who understood operational efficiency and profit margins. They could see how my technology would revolutionize their competitive position in the marketplace. The algorithm's machine learning capabilities adapt to your specific workflow patterns. I explained, showing performance optimization charts. Processing speed increases over time as the system learns your company's unique requirements and preferences. Marcus stood and walked to the windows overlooking the production floor. 40 years ago, my father built this company on the principle that American manufacturing could compete with anyone in the world. We've struggled lately because our competitors have embraced technology while we've relied on traditional methods. He turned back to face the conference table. Mr. Morrison, your algorithm represents exactly the kind of innovation we need to secure our future. The financial projections are compelling, but more importantly, this technology will allow us to retain our workforce while improving productivity. Diana nodded enthusiastically. The return on investment exceeds our most optimistic expectations. I recommend immediate approval for the full $50 million implementation. Robert added his technical endorsement. The system architecture is elegant and robust. Implementation risk appears minimal, and the scalability ensures long-term viability. Marcus returned to his seat and looked directly at me. Mr. Morrison, Velocity Pay has earned our full confidence. We're approving the $50 million deal, effective immediately. The room erupted in congratulations and handshakes. Jonathan beamed with pride as he discussed contract details with Diana. I felt a surge of professional satisfaction knowing that my months of development work had culminated in this moment of validation. As the formal meeting concluded, Marcus approached me privately. Mr. Morrison, I want you to know this deal will preserve over 600 jobs at our facility. We were facing some difficult decisions about workforce reductions, but your technology eliminates that need. He paused, studying my business card. Morrison is an interesting coincidence. We have a floor supervisor named Gerald Morrison who's been with us for over 30 years. Outstanding employee, completely dedicated to this company. Are you familiar with the Ohio area? My heart hammered against my ribs. Yes, I grew up in Columbus. Gerald's exactly the kind of experienced worker who makes American manufacturing special. Thanks to your innovation, employees like Gerald can continue building careers here instead of worrying about plant closures. I managed to maintain my professional composure while my mind reeled from the cosmic irony. I'm glad the technology can help preserve good jobs. Marcus smiled and shook my hand firmly. Your algorithm just saved Gerald Morrison's career, along with hundreds of others. I hope you understand the impact of your work extends far beyond software code. As I drove back to downtown Columbus, I replayed Marcus' words over and over. I had just saved my father's job while he lay in a hospital bed, still believing his son was a disappointment who worked in pajamas instead of contributing meaningful value to society. The validation felt hollow without Gerald's knowledge or respect, but I took solace in knowing that 600 families would continue receiving paychecks because of my technical expertise and professional dedication. 2 weeks passed without any contact from my family. I buried myself in the Henderson Manufacturing Implementation Project, working closely with their technical team to customize my algorithm for their specific operational requirements. The irony of improving my father's workplace systems while he remained unaware of my involvement became a daily reminder of our fractured relationship. Emma texted occasionally with updates about Gerald's recovery. He had returned to work against medical advice, claiming that floor supervisors couldn't manage production from hospital beds. His cardiologist recommended stress reduction and lighter workloads, suggestions Gerald dismissed as weakness. My mother called Wednesday evening, her voice strained with exhaustion. Sean, your father is working himself to death trying to prove he's not sick. The doctors say he needs family support, but he won't admit he's struggling. He made it clear he doesn't want to see his disappointment of a son. I replied, unable to hide the bitterness in my voice. You're not a disappointment, honey. He just doesn't understand your world. Mom, I'm 28 years old. I don't need his understanding anymore, but I do deserve his respect." She sighed deeply. "Can't you just come home and pretend everything is normal? For the sake of family harmony. Pretend everything is normal." That summarized my family's approach to conflict resolution. Ignore hurtful behavior and expect the injured party to absorb the damage silently. I had spent my entire adult life pretending Gerald's dismissive comments didn't affect me. But Thanksgiving dinner had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Thursday afternoon brought unexpected news from the Henderson manufacturing project. Marcus Thompson called personally to express his amazement at the algorithm's performance during initial testing phases. "Sean, your system exceeded every benchmark we established. Processing speeds are actually faster than your projections, and the user interface is incredibly intuitive. Our employees adapted to the new workflow within days instead of weeks." "I'm pleased to hear the implementation is going smoothly," I replied, proud of my team's technical execution. "There's something else," Marcus continued. "Our floor supervisors have been particularly enthusiastic about the efficiency improvements. Gerald Morrison specifically mentioned that the new system eliminates the paperwork bottlenecks that used to slow down production approvals." My throat tightened at the mention of my father's name. Gerald was praising technology I had developed, completely unaware that his son was the architect of his workplace's transformation. "Gerald's been with us for 31 years, Marcus added, "and I've never seen him this optimistic about operational changes. Usually, as skeptical of new technology, but he told me, your system actually makes sense for real workers." The irony cut deep. My father, who had mocked my career for being disconnected from real work, was now celebrating the practical benefits of my professional expertise. He respected my algorithm while continuing to dismiss the person who created it. Friday evening, I decided to visit Jessica's apartment instead of staying home alone with my conflicted thoughts. She lived in a converted warehouse in the brewery district, surrounded by art studios and trendy restaurants that attracted young professionals. "You look exhausted," she observed, handing me a glass of wine as we settled onto her couch. "I've been thinking about Gerald constantly," I admitted. "Every day, I work on systems that improve his job while he tells people his son is a failure who plays with computers." Jessica curled up beside me, her expression sympathetic. "Have you considered that maybe his ignorance is its own punishment? Hez missing out on a relationship with an accomplished, caring person because of his stubborn pride. Sometimes I wonder if I should just tell him about the Henderson deal," I mused. "Show him that his dismissive attitude was wrong, and give him the opportunity to claim credit or minimize your achievement." Jessica shook her head firmly. "Sean, you don't need his validation anymore. Your work speaks for itself." Saturday morning, I was reviewing technical specifications in my home office when my doorbell rang. Through the security monitor, I saw a familiar figure standing on my building's front steps, looking uncomfortable and uncertain. My father, Gerald, stood at my apartment door, holding a folded newspaper and shifting his weight nervously. He wore his weekend clothes, worn jeans, a flannel shirt, and work boots that had seen decades of factory floors. His face showed the strain of recent health problems, but his eyes held an expression I had never seen before, confusion mixed with something that might have been respect. I buzzed him into the building and waited by my apartment door as his heavy footsteps climbed the stairs. When he reached my floor, I could see he was breathing heavily from the exertion, still recovering from his heart attack. "Hello, Gerald," I said quietly, not inviting him inside. "Sean." He held up the newspaper, his voice uncertain. "I need to talk to you about something. Can I come in?" I stepped aside and gestured toward my living room. Gerald entered slowly, his eyes taking in the hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, and modern furniture that reflected my professional success. He had never visited my apartment before, and I could see him processing the evidence of my financial stability. "Nice place," he said awkwardly, settling onto my couch like a man unsure of his welcome. "Thank you." I remained standing, arms crossed defensively. Gerald unfolded the newspaper to reveal the business section. A large photograph dominated the page, my professional headshot accompanying an article titled, "Local Software Genius Saves Manufacturing Jobs." The subtitle read, "Velocity Pay Developers, Algorithm Revolutionizes Henderson Manufacturing Operations." My father's face showed a mixture of shock, confusion, and dawning realization as he held up the newspaper. "This is you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're the software genius who saved my company." The newspaper trembled in Gerald's hands as he read the article aloud, his voice growing weaker with each sentence. "Sean Morrison, senior developer at Velocity Pay, designed a revolutionary algorithm that will preserve over 600 jobs at Henderson Manufacturing. Morrison's innovation represents a $50 million investment in American manufacturing technology." He set the paper down and looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. The usual confidence and bluster had vanished, replaced by something vulnerable and uncertain. "I had no idea," he whispered. "Marcus Thompson called this morning to thank our family for raising such a brilliant son. He said you personally saved my job and 600 others." I remained silent, letting him process the magnitude of what he had discovered. For 2 weeks, I had carried this secret while he continued believing his son was a disappointment who played with computers instead of contributing real value. "You knew," Gerald continued, his voice gaining strength as understanding dawned. "When I mocked your career at Thanksgiving, you knew you were about to save my company." "I found out the night before my presentation," I replied coolly, completely by coincidence. Gerald stood and began pacing my living room, his work boots heavy on the hardwood floors. "Marcus said your technology is revolutionary. That manufacturing companies across the country want to implement your system. He called you one of the most innovative minds he's ever encountered. The same innovative mind you publicly humiliated at Thanksgiving dinner." He stopped pacing and faced me directly. "Sean, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about your career, wrong about your contributions, wrong about everything. You were wrong about more than my career, Gerald. You were wrong about respect, about family, about what it means to support someone you're supposed to love." My father's face crumpled, and for the first time in my life, I saw him fight back tears. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to take back 30 years of dismissive comments and skeptical looks. You could start by explaining why you felt the need to humiliate me in front of our entire family." Gerald sank back onto the couch, suddenly looking older than his 58 years. "You want the truth?" I was terrified, scared that the world was leaving me behind, that everything I understood about work and success was becoming obsolete. He ran his hands through his graying hair, struggling to articulate feelings he had probably never examined before. "When you graduated with your computer science degree, I didn't understand what you had learned or how it translated to real value. I knew how to supervise a production line, how to meet quotas, how to manage workers who built things with their hands. So you decided my education was worthless. I decided your success made me feel stupid," Gerald admitted, his voice breaking. "Every promotion you earned, every technical achievement, every conversation about algorithms and software development reminded me that I couldn't even program a digital clock without reading the manual. The confession hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I wanted to cross. My anger battled with unexpected sympathy as I watched my father confront his own insecurities. 3 months ago," Gerald continued, "Marcus announced that Henderson was struggling financially. He said we needed to modernize our operations or face potential closure. I started working double shifts, trying to prove my value to a company that might not need floor supervisors much longer. You had a heart attack from stress about losing the job my technology saved. The irony isn't lost on me, Gerald said with a bitter laugh. I was killing myself trying to preserve a career my son had already rescued, while publicly mocking the expertise that made that rescue possible. He stood again and walked to my windows, staring out at the city lights below. Marcus said you could have taken credit for saving Henderson during your presentation, but you focused on the technology instead of personal recognition. He said you demonstrated remarkable professionalism and humility. I wasn't interested in personal recognition. I was interested in solving their operational problems. Gerald turned back to me, his eyes now openly wet with tears. That's what real work looks like, isn't it? Focusing on solutions instead of ego, contributing value instead of demanding credit. For the first time in our relationship, my father was seeing me clearly, instead of through the lens of his own fears and limitations. The moment felt simultaneously satisfying and heartbreaking. Gerald, I spent my entire adult life trying to earn your respect, I said, my voice softer now. I achieved academic honors, professional success, financial stability, and recognition from industry leaders. Nothing was ever enough to change your opinion of my worth, because I was measuring your achievements against my own insecurities instead of their actual value. Your insecurities became my burden. Every family gathering, every phone call, every conversation about my career included subtle reminders that you considered my life's work illegitimate. Gerald walked back to the couch and sat down heavily. How do I fix this, Sean? How do I repair 30 years of damage? You start by acknowledging that your behavior was wrong, not just misguided or misunderstood. You humiliated me at Thanksgiving because you wanted to feel superior, not because you didn't understand technology. He nodded slowly. You're right. I was cruel because it made me feel better about my own limitations. I used your success as an opportunity to belittle something I didn't understand instead of celebrating what you had accomplished. And you need to understand that respect isn't something you can withdraw and restore at will. Trust takes time to rebuild. What can I do to earn another chance? I looked at my father, sitting on my couch, finally vulnerable enough to admit his mistakes and ask for forgiveness. The anger that had sustained me since Thanksgiving was beginning to transform into something more complex and potentially healing. You can start by learning about my actual work instead of dismissing it. You can stop making jokes about pajamas and start asking genuine questions about what I do. You can treat my career with the same respect you'd want for your own. Gerald wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Would you teach me? About your work, about technology, about the things you're passionate about. The question surprised me. For 3 decades, Gerald had shown no interest in understanding my perspective or learning about my achievements. Now he was asking to be educated by the son whose expertise he had spent years dismissing. That depends, I replied carefully. Are you willing to acknowledge when you don't understand something instead of pretending it's not important? Yes. Are you willing to celebrate my successes instead of minimizing them? Yes. Are you willing to treat me like an adult whose opinions and choices deserve respect? Gerald stood and walked toward me, extending his hand. Sean, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to build a real relationship with my son instead of the adversarial nonsense I've created. I stared at his outstretched hand, considering whether I was ready to risk trusting him again. The newspaper article had forced him to confront the reality of my professional accomplishments. But would this revelation create lasting change or temporary guilt? This isn't about the Henderson deal, I said finally. This is about fundamental respect and how you choose to treat people you're supposed to love. I understand. I shook his hand, feeling the calluses that represented 40 years of honest labor. For the first time, I realized we weren't so different. We both worked hard, solved problems, and contributed value to our communities. We just did it in different ways. 6 months later, Easter dinner looked completely different than Thanksgiving had. The same relatives gathered around my mother's dining room table, but the atmosphere carried warmth instead of tension. Gerald sat beside me, asking thoughtful questions about my latest project instead of making dismissive jokes about my career. "Sean's been teaching me about machine learning algorithms," Gerald announced to the table, his voice filled with genuine pride. "Did you know his software can predict manufacturing bottlenecks before they actually happen? It's like having a crystal ball for production planning." Uncle Rick, who had laughed loudest at Gerald's Thanksgiving mockery, now listened respectfully as my father explained how technology was transforming modern manufacturing. "The Henderson implementation has been so successful that 3 other companies have requested similar systems," Gerald continued. "My son's innovation is revolutionizing how American factories compete globally." Emma smiled at me from across the table. "It's amazing how much Dad has learned about your work. He calls me every week to share something new he discovered about software development." "Learning has been the easy part," Gerald replied. "Understanding how wrong I was took much longer." After dinner, Gerald and I walked through my childhood neighborhood, discussing the integration challenges of scaling my algorithm for larger manufacturing operations. He asked detailed questions about database architecture and user interface design, subjects that would have bored him senseless a year earlier. "Marcus offered me early retirement with full benefits," Gerald said as we paused beside the elementary school playground where I had spent countless hours as a child. 58 is young for retirement, but the Henderson efficiency improvements mean they need fewer supervisors. "What did you tell him?" "That I want to work 5 more years and use that time to learn everything I can about the technology that's changing our industry. Maybe I can become a bridge between traditional workers and innovative systems." The transformation in my father still amazed me. The man who had once mocked my computer games now spent evenings reading technical articles and asking informed questions about software development methodologies. He attended company meetings where my algorithm's performance was discussed, contributing insights about how floor workers interacted with digital interfaces. "There's something else," Gerald said, stopping to face me directly. "I've been talking to other parents at the plant whose children work in technology fields. Turns out I wasn't the only father who didn't understand what his kids were accomplishing." "What do you mean?" "I started an informal group where parents can learn about modern careers from each other. Diana Walsh's daughter works in cybersecurity, Robert Chen's son develops medical devices, and Tom Bradley's daughter creates educational software. We meet monthly to educate ourselves about industries we don't understand." The idea touched me deeply. Gerald had recognized that his ignorance wasn't unique and had taken responsibility for addressing it proactively. Instead of remaining defensive about his limitations, he was working to prevent other families from experiencing the conflicts that had damaged our relationship. "Last month, I gave a presentation about manufacturing applications of artificial intelligence," Gerald continued, smiling at my surprised expression. 15 parents learned how their children's expertise in data science and software engineering contributes to American economic competitiveness. How did that feel? Terrifying and exhilarating. Kind of like watching your son give a $50 million presentation, I imagine. We walked in comfortable silence for several minutes, processing how much our relationship had evolved since that painful Thanksgiving evening. The respect I had always wanted from my father was finally emerging, but it felt different than I had expected. Instead of validation for past achievements, it represented the foundation for a genuine friendship between adults who appreciated each other's strengths. "I need to tell you something important," Gerald said as we approached his house. "Marcus mentioned that Velocity Pay is considering expansion into international markets. He asked if I knew whether you might be interested in leading their global manufacturing initiative. He talked to you about my career prospects. He values my opinion because I understand both traditional manufacturing and your innovative technology." Marcus sees me as someone who can evaluate whether proposed projects will actually work in real industrial settings. The irony made me laugh. Gerald had become a bridge between my digital innovations and practical manufacturing applications, exactly the role he was best suited to fill. His decades of hands-on experience, combined with his newfound technological literacy, created unique insights that neither pure engineers nor software developers could provide. What did you tell him? That my son has the vision and expertise to revolutionize manufacturing globally, but the decision should be entirely his to make. I also said that if he chose to accept the challenge, he would have my complete support and encouragement, and your willingness to forgive my ignorance and teach me about your world means everything to me. We shook hands in the driveway, a gesture that had become our ritual for ending meaningful conversations. The calluses on Gerald's palms represented decades of honest labor, while the slight discoloration on my fingers came from countless hours typing code that solved complex problems. Different tools, same dedication. Different skills, same value. As I drove back to my apartment that evening, I reflected on how much pain could have been avoided if my father had asked questions instead of making assumptions about my career. But I also realized that some lessons can only be learned through experience, and Gerald's transformation felt more genuine because he had initiated it himself. The Henderson manufacturing success had forced him to confront his prejudices, but the ongoing effort to understand and support my work represented a choice he made daily. That choice meant more to me than any professional achievement or financial milestone. My phone buzzed with a text message from Jessica. "How was Easter dinner with the family?" "Completely different than Thanksgiving," I replied. "In the best possible way." 3 weeks later, I accepted Velocity Pay's offer to lead their global manufacturing initiative, a position that would require extensive travel and collaboration with industrial operations worldwide. Gerald was the first person I called with the news. "Congratulations, son," he said, his voice filled with genuine pride. "You've earned this opportunity through years of exceptional work and innovation." Son, the word carried weight and warmth that had been missing from our relationship for too long. "I'm going to need advisors who understand traditional manufacturing operations," I said. "People who can help me bridge the gap between cutting-edge technology and practical industrial applications." "I know exactly the person for that job," Gerald replied, and I could hear him smiling through the phone. 6 months after my father mocked my pajama job at Thanksgiving dinner, he became my closest consultant on the project that would define the next phase of my career. We traveled together to manufacturing facilities across North America, with Gerald explaining operational realities while I designed technological solutions. The relationship we built was stronger than anything we had shared before, grounded in mutual respect rather than obligation or expectation. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, but it does require choosing growth over resentment. Gerald learned that understanding someone's work means understanding their value as a person. Most importantly, we both discovered that families can heal from even deep wounds when people are willing to acknowledge their mistakes and commit to doing better. Have you ever had a family member dismiss something important to you, only to later realize they were wrong? How did you handle that situation? And what did it teach you about forgiveness and family relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to help others find it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about family, career challenges, and personal growth. And if you know someone who's dealing with similar family conflicts, please share this story with them. Thank you for listening. And remember that respect is something we give to people we care about, not something we withhold until they prove themselves worthy. Harris, to building stronger families through understanding instead of judgment.